party people stay, waiting for the ship to come in.
The next thing I wanted to talk about is, and we've touched on it a little bit here and there, the music.
Yes.
This is, I think you're the first author that I have been I guess I've read your work, but a book soundtrack to both books is something that I've never heard of before. And I think your writing already lends itself to that kind of lyrical musicality that a soundtrack would just make sense.
Yeah.
But like, what gave you the idea to say, okay, I'm gonna have a book track?
I think it's because I was always doing music. For a long time I've done it. I've been an avid listener since I was a kid. I would force my mother to watch me, as a kid, crawling over the kitchen counter singing Madonna songs into hairbrushes and stuff. My patient mother.
Yeah.
And my mother has an amazing voice. She sang on the radio in India when she was like 16.
Really?
And, and my brother plays piano, guitar. My father loves music. So it's kind of a musical household in terms of at least love of music. And then from when I was in New York, I was in bands. Like I was in a band. This was more a recording project. It's really three friends hanging out recording stuff in a band called Wild Mercury, and then this band IO that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
And then in London, I joined a band called San Francisco, and Marie Tweje, who's the lead guitarist in that band, is the person with whom I do a lot of my writing as well. So the guitarist from the New York band and the guitarist from the London band are the two people with whom I wrote most of Bombay Spleen, the new book.
Okay.
So for me, it just feels like those were natural. Music was a natural way to explore a story just as much as prose was a natural way. Like music feels like it's audible prose, and prose is kind of like silent music. And although you can hear the books and albums independently, for me they're one project, even though they look like they're two projects because there's two different objects or two different sites you download from or that kind of thing. But like Bombay Blues for me is kind of my ode to Bombay, like a prose poem to Bombay, and then Bombay Spleen is the audible part of that, and it's a reference to Paris Spleen, which is Baudelaire's prose poem to Paris, and it's the book that Dimple's reading that she loses early on in her trip to Bombay. And I knew with Bombay Blues, I knew from really early on I wanted the book to have the feel of music because, for one, it's an exploration of the blues, but on all levels, like the actual, blues you see, that Dimple sees as a photographer in the landscape, but also the mood and the music. And also a lot of the characters are in music. There's bands, musicians, music producers, Kirsch is a DJ. A lot of the settings are in musical venues. And so it felt to me like it made sense for the book to feel musical. And then with the album, I wanted the album to have the feel of a story. And I also wanted to, parallel Dimple's journey through the narrator on the album, even though it's not exactly the same journey, but also kind of parallel the development of Bombay itself from the 7 islands it once was to becoming the city we know today. So like
Heptanesia.
The what? Heptanesia, yes. Heptanesia.
Yeah.
That's the oldest known documented name for the islands that were Bombay, and it comes from the ancient Greek for cluster of 7 islands. And that word, as soon as I heard that word, I knew I had to use it no matter what. It was too good a word. So there's actually a chapter called Heptanesia. There's a song called Heptanesia on the album. And that word just, sounded like anesthesia, amnesia, synesthesia, and felt like it tied into all these themes about memory and home and the search for home and when things aren't quite where you left them when you go back to a place. With those ideas.
And your music video, Heptanesia, is going to be on MTV Indies.
Yeah, it is on MTV Indies.
It is now.
India, yeah. So it has actually found its way to Heptanesia itself.
Ooh. I listened to it a few times. I mean, I've listened to the whole album, of course, but I saw the video. Very well put together. You have a lovely singing voice, and just the arrangement, the composition. I read, people were saying this is the new Bond song.
If only, that wouldn't be bad.
I thought, okay, if there was a Bond film set in India, in Bombay, that could work. That particular song did sound a little like Shirley Manson,
Oh,
Garbage.
I love Shirley
I kind of
Manson.
picked up on that.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that's funny. I didn't think of that at all, but the um, band I was in New York, I think when they put out the ad when they were looking for a singer, they were interested in someone who was into Shirley Manson. Like that's actually one of the people they had found
oh,
at that time because Garbage had just been. I think Garbage's second album was out at that time.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, but yeah, I love Shirley Manson.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She's cool. Stupid girl. And she actually had a Bond song.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, so
So,
crossing fingers,
all
crossing toes.
happening. Okay. Softball questions. When you're not writing, who are you sitting down to read in the event that you have free
Yeah.
time?
Well, my daughter's homework and their
Oh,
stories. They're very into writing, you know.
are your children
Yeah, the older,
write themselves?
yeah, they write for school, but they write for themselves also. And the older one, the 11-year-old, is doing a lot of songwriting now, and she's starting to learn
Aw,
piano and guitar and all. So that's quite exciting. Um,
nice.
the most recent books I've read are The Wife by Meg Wolitzer and The Interestings by Meg Wolitzer, which were
Ooh.
just wonderful. I had never read her before. I don't know how I didn't hear about that party because it's an awesome one to be at. I reread not Unbearable Lightness of Being, but another Milan Kundera book recently, and he's one of my all-time favorite authors, and it was so exciting to read him again and feel a complete that same initial spark completely undiluted after all of
Yeah.
these years. I want to reread everything he's done now that I reread one. And
Yeah.
on my night table currently, my night table is actually just made of books. There's no table. Is I have M Train, Patti Smith's book, M Train.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The
Chap
review autobiography.
Yes, I loved Just Kids. That's one of my all-time favorite books. So M Train
Yeah.
is there. Chapter and Verse by Bernard Sumner, who's from New Order, the band New Order. Paula Yu's book, 20 Cents, Muhammad Yunus and the Village Bank. She got the South Asia Book Award in the children's category.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. God Loves
This year?
Sorry, yeah, this year.
Okay.
Yeah. God Loves Hair by Vivek Shraya and A Time to Dance by Padma Venkatraman. The Ocean of Mrs. Nagai by Sharbari Ahmed, and I Pity the Poor Immigrant by Zachary Lazar. So that's what my night table is made up of at the moment. And then sometimes it gets a little shorter as I read them, but then it gets taller as I add more. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's gonna happen. You may have already mentioned one of these authors already, but I was gonna ask, who has inspired you throughout the years to do your best writing?
I think my main inspiration is just the people, like life.
Okay.
Kind of relationships, friendships, and kind of the world that I'm in, the people around me. I would say that to me they're the greatest inspirations. In terms of books that make me feel like, yeah, like I want to grab a pen and do something.
Yeah.
Definitely Milan Kundera, who
Mhm.
I mentioned. Haruki Murakami gets
Yeah.
me quite pumped up. Francesca Lia Bloch,
Hmm.
who did the Weetzie Bat books. Dangerous Angels. Oh, they're
Okay.
great. Check them out. They're really, really good.
Okay. I'm writing it down.
Then things like, Dickens, the
Mhm.
Odyssey. What I also find, other art forms at least as inspiring, just as inspiring as books. So kind of, music and film and all that. In music, Suzanne Vega, Nina Persson, who's the lead singer from A Camp. A Camp, actually, the A Camp albums. Suzanne Vega, the B-52s,
Yeah.
Serge Gainsbourg, Arcade Fire, because everything makes me
Yeah.
feels like an anthem, like I want to stand up and
I
declare.
know.
PJ Harvey.
It's very bombastic.
So, yeah, absolutely incredible. And Patti Smith in all categories, basically. Patti Smith in poetry, Patti Smith in fiction, Patti Smith in music, and
Yeah.
and I've been getting this is completely may sound like it's completely different, but while I've been in the States for the holidays right now, I've been catching up on all these Saturday Night Live episodes with Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, who I'd never really seen that much of before, even though they're a phenomenon.
Yeah.
They get me very excited too, although to do what I'm not really sure, but I just get very kind of giddy watching their, absolute brilliance at comedy.
Uh,
So
no,
love.
I totally understand. One of my good friends, she and I keep asking each other, when are we going to start writing our own sketch comedy
Yeah.
show? Like, when is this happening for us? And I think Amy Poehler and Tina Fey, that kind of female friendship
Yes.
dynamic duo, really get us pumped to want to do something.
I know I get like that too, although I just get more ice cream usually. I don't know.
Yeah,
I get very kind of like, oh, they're so good. They're just so good. They're so
I'm
good. I feel so
assuming
happy. I feel so happy.
you may have already answered it in so many words, but my last question, I suppose, for the viewers,
Yeah.
for the first time writers out there who have not discovered their own wonderful protagonist, or the plot that's going to keep them driving, what's the extra push that you could offer them to like get it going, to keep it going,
Yeah.
keep the momentum going?
I think, well, you have to have faith. I mean, writing is such an act of faith because you start with a blank page and, seek your story, and it is there. It's a writer friend of mine was saying to me, it's like, the sculpture that's within the hunk of stone. You have to kind of keep chiseling your way towards it. And I'd take workshops if you need to, creative writing workshops. That definitely helped me in the beginning when I moved to New York, to have a deadline and to have, other people who were going through all the same kind of crises of faith, but solid desire to write, that kind of very evocative mix of emotion, to have people co-conspirators with you on that journey. At a certain point, you may not need them though, and you might need to just go into your own zone and not get too much feedback. But
That's true.
you kind of know, I think, when that moment comes, and don't be afraid to write 20 pages and throw 19 out, because that's the one where you finally hit on something where you got to the heart of the story, or something that just like really you feel the spark. You feel the spark that got you on the journey to begin with. And if you have to be scared of something, be very afraid of not writing those 20 pages and never getting that one page. A lot of stuff gets thrown out. I found that with Born Confused, I started to just keep a folder of things that I cut so that I could cut them, but I wasn't really losing them. I think I just called it like Born Confused Cut Saves or something. And
Yeah.
because there were entire chapters, there was a whole subplot. The subplot I didn't really mind actually going, but there were some sections or scenes, not lots of chapters, but some scenes, a couple in their entirety, and I, put them in there, or there'd be some descriptive paragraph in New York that I had gotten too attached to, but it didn't belong in the book, and I put them in there. And then you'll be able to cut, but feel like, okay, I can always go back and put it in, which of course you will never do, because then you'll be at another stage entirely by that time. So that folder, I probably still have it somewhere, but I never re-input anything from it.
Oh my gosh, that makes me very anxious, you saying that. That makes me sound, I don't know, because it takes a lot of work to pump out 20 pages of anything.
Well, it may not be 20 for you. For me, I write long stuff,
Yeah.
so there's a lot that I cut also.
Yeah.
But no, it was meant to soothe you. Sorry if it had the opposite effect, because I know for me,
No.
I found cutting really hard, and
No,
also when you're,
I understand. It's
yeah,
just, yeah, I guess when you come from, and I've just gotten out of grad school, so every page counts.
yeah, yeah.
Every deadline must be met. But when you're writing something a lot slower and at your own pace, like a novel, yeah, that makes total sense.
It's a big body of work.
Yeah.
So that's how I felt with the first one, that I wanted to know those bits were there if I needed them.
Mhm.
But with Bombay Blues, I was just cutting. I don't know if it's having two small kids, or it's just,
Yeah.
there was no time to kind of like hang on to things that didn't belong there. And that helped actually. That helped that there wasn't the luxury of just kind of like thinking, oh, but that was put so nicely. I liked that little metaphor. It's just kind of like doesn't belong, slowing the story down, it is a slow story, but that's the intentional slow part. But it was a much slower story before, with things that didn't need to be there. And definitely don't worry about whether you're going to get published, or I think don't even worry about who your audience is while you're writing, because some people might differ with that, but I feel like if you start overthinking that stuff, you're going to end up writing, projecting what you think a publisher or a reader is looking for onto your story, rather than actually seeing what your characters are trying to tell you and what your story is trying to tell you. And then you can just end up, focusing on all the wrong stuff. And for being in your writing zone, I feel like you have to just stick with the story, stick with your characters, be true to the story, be true to your characters, and forget about any world outside of that where this thing gets packaged and put out there. And don't worry about what anybody will think when you're writing. Don't even worry about what you think, I think, because that can be the hardest voice to turn off. But if you surrender yourself entirely, like, to your story, incredible things begin to happen. I mean, really, it feels like divine things happen. Just as I was describing before, when, the character of Sangeetha started to reveal things to me about herself, I had no idea. Like, that was in no outline I had written beforehand.
Yeah.
It's pure magic. I mean, it's really wonderful once you get in that zone. And also, I would say to keep in mind that inspiration is a habit, and you don't actually need it to start working. You need to start working to actually have it. And when you start doing the work, you'll find inspiration in, like, that perfect, diner coffee. It'll come from every single angle, and as you go on, I found this with both books, you'll find at a certain point, like with Bombay Blues, my first trip to India, I was seeking my story. By the end of the trip, I knew I still didn't have it. Then I kept writing. I went there for my second trip, and I knew a little bit more what I was looking for, but then there was still a lot of surprises. But then by the third trip, that amazing moment came where it felt like my story was actually seeking me, and things were just kind of landing in my lap, or everything that was happening was falling into place within the story. And that will definitely happen. That always happens, I think, once you get in the flow, because that's what the flow is. And so have faith, and have faith in the power of your voice and the power of your story. And when you do, you create your listeners and your readers through that faith, I think. I'm waiting to read you. And thank you for waiting. Thank you for waiting a decade to read me again. Also,
I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, you can definitely do it, because I spent so long feeling I couldn't, and it's absolutely true that it is much easier to write than to actually avoid it, because avoiding it is it's a very heavy feeling, and it becomes a full-time job.
Sorry,
It's okay.
Plugging something up. No, I think that is solid advice. It's something I definitely need to hear. Yeah, I do appreciate the whole go out there and find like-minded people in workshops and stuff, but I do believe you're right. At a certain point, you'll know, like, this is a solitary road that I need to walk down, because nobody's not really going to quite get what I'm doing.
And it's actually a pretty empowering moment when you get there, when you realize that actually I might actually know more than other people do about what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So that's it feels natural by the time it happens, I think. And then it may happen in phases. Maybe at some point later you'd want readers again, but you may not. You may have kind of just found that zone. The other thing I would say is, if you're stuck, is just stay creative, even if it's in a completely different area. Because I think, doing music for me kept me in the zone too. If I was stuck when I was writing anything in the prose in Bombay Blues, I would start working on a song version of a similar theme. And then in the years before in New York, I took creative writing workshops. I also took an intensive screenplay writing class. And again, that script is probably not one that I would share, but I think a lot of the ideas I later developed in Born Confused were in that script. And I also did an intensive filmmaking class one summer at the New York Film Academy, and did a short film there. And I can see now too that there were things in that short film that are probably in Born Confused as well. So I would say explore your story from as many angles as possible. And even if it's through other people's, just by getting, reading somebody who gets you excited, or watching Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, like something that just makes you feel really energized. And then also just make a doodle about it, start casting the film for it, write the movie trailer, make a soundtrack. Even if you don't write the music yourself, like think of like what would be playing in certain scenes. I did that with Born Confused. I some of the scenes when I wrote them, I played in our flat in London the music I thought would be playing. So like for the club scene, I was playing the music I thought that that the DJ would be playing. But then at a certain point in that scene also, when Dimple's much more in her own headspace, I'd shifted it to something completely different that I thought would be what was playing for her, even though she was in a room full of dancing people. So things like that, I think, are kind of fun little ways to keep your enthusiasm up.
Yeah.
You know? So
That's true. Mixed media.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But I'm so happy to have spoken with you today about life, art, culture, family, the whole melange of wonderful things that you bring to the table.
Oh,
And
thank you. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I actually forgot we were just kind of well, we are just kind of talking. But
we
it's
are.
been fantastic, and thank you for for reading and for being such a supporter of Dimple's journey. I really appreciate it. That's actually, this is kind of one of the best things about the whole process, is when you actually get to connect with a reader, and
I know.
it feels like you already know each other because you've connected through this other space.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you
is
for
kind
that.
of like a telegraphic kind of connection.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't feel like the first time we're talking, for sure.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I hope it's not the last.
Well, I'm signing off with the viewers. Thank you again, the Motley News viewers, and thank you again, Tanuja,
Thank you, Cherish.
for talking with me. And until next time, take it easy, guys.